Good evening everyone and welcome back to some Sporting Memories answers tonight. And tonight of course we've been looking at the 1970s sporting decade. Try to draw out 15 memorable sporting moments for you to have a bit of a reminisce about and think about. So I'll run through the answers, I'll recap the question, give the answer and maybe a little bit of background where we can. So if you've got your answers ready, number one, we looked at who won the gold at the decathlon in the 1976 Montreal Olympics. Now a lot of people at this point probably would think Daley Thompson. Fortunately it's wrong. Daley Thompson did not win gold here. Daley won the gold at the Moscow 1980 and the Los Angeles 84 Olympics. This gold medals was won by a certain Bruce Jenner. Do you remember that name? I bet you probably remember this individual more as Caitlyn Jenner. Do you remember that name? Caitlyn Jenner, who famously last year, I think it was last year, wasn't it, was on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, transgender. That's correct. So now Caitlyn Jenner, 70 years of age, obviously got a very famous children, famous background, but in the 70s, the early 70s to sort of mid 70s onwards, Bruce Jenner was the world's best all-round athlete, as competing as Bruce Jenner. Set a world record in the points for the decathlon at one point, but was definitely the undisputed Olympic champion. So number one, Bruce Jenner. If you put down Caitlyn Jenner, that's right as well, because it's the same person. So that's number one, well done. Number two, bit easier I think this one. Which football club won 3 consecutive European Cups in 71, 72 and 73? And the answer we're looking for was Ajax, or Ajax of Amsterdam, the same thing. So Ajax were prolific, weren't they? In the late 60s into the early 70s, coined the phrase total football. The player everybody seems to remember is the key player of the time, Johan Cruyff. And Ajax, obviously, as you can see from their record, were a dominant force because in those days you had to win your league in your respective nation, then you went into the European Cup. It wasn't like the mini league system we've got now. So they were an amazing club at the time, which also showed up in their national squads as well, didn't it? The Dutch national team. Number 3, boxing. In his last fight in May 71, 36-year-old Henry Cooper lost to which 21-year-old boxer? Any ideas on that one? Well, he lost to a young, up-and-coming professional called Joe Bugner. So well done if you got Joe Bugner. It did go to the 15 rounds, and Henry Cooper lost by the slimmest of margins. It's a controversial vote given to Bugner, and even to this date still regarded as probably one of the most controversial British fights of all time. A lot of people believed Cooper should have taken it, but the judge's decision did marginally go to Joe Bugner. So number 3 was Joe Bugner. Number 4, back to football. Which club did Nottingham Forest beat to win their first ever European Cup final in 1979? Who scored the only goal with a back post header? Let's start with the club. So they beat, no, it wasn't Munich. They beat the Swedish side, Malmo. That's right, they beat Malmo. And who was the only scorer? It was Britain's first £1 million signing that year, Trevor Francis. Well done if you got Trevor Francis. The side was obviously made up of a lot of capable potential scorers. Gary Birtles, John Robertson, Tony Woodcock, Viv Anderson, there was a whole host of top players in this side, but Trevor Francis was the one who got the header. They were there again in 1980, weren't they, at the European Cup final, where they beat Hamburg, not Munich. The 1980 final was held at Munich, but they beat Hamburg to lift the cup for a second time. And obviously, probably the best years of Nottingham Forest to date, aren't they? So that's number 4. The answer was Malmo and Trevor Francis. Number 5, boxing again. Which undefeated world heavyweight champion lost in the famous Rumble in the Jungle in 1974? Well, the answer is George Foreman. It was George Foreman who lost to, of course, Muhammad Ali. It was held in Zaire, in Africa, which is now known as the Democratic Republic of Congo. And to this day, it's still seen as one of the most, not so much controversial, but amazing boxing fights. Ali won. I think he took Foreman out, didn't he? I can't remember what round it was. So the answer to number 5, George Foreman. Number 6, interesting one this. Who in 1979 set 3 world records in just 41 days? Well, let's get the sport first of all. This was track and field. And the individual we were looking for was the middle distance British runner, Sebastian Coe. It was Sebastian Coe, not Steve Ovett on this occasion, although he also did break records. So I'll run you through it. He first of all set the new 800 metres world record in Oslo, 1 minute 42.33. He also followed that up with the mile, 3 minutes 48.95. And then later in Zurich that year, the 1500 metres record fell to 3 minutes 32.03. And he became the first middle distance runner to hold all 3 of those records at the same time. Coe went on to further lower the 800 metres record, you might remember, to 1:41.73, and its current world record was set by a certain David Rudisha. You might remember that name. And the current 800 metres world record is 1:40.89, which is phenomenal speed. So the answer to number 6, Sebastian Coe, who set the 800, the mile and the 1500 metres all in the space of those short 41 days. Number 7, Formula 1. Who in 1973 was champion for the 3rd time in his final year of Grand Prix racing? It was the one and only Jackie Stewart, who won Formula 1 crown in 69, 71 and of course 1973. Sir Jackie Stewart, the answer to number 7. Number 8, interesting one. In tennis, who won the female singles title at the 1976 French Open? And we were looking to the presenter, who we've all watched time and time again. She's presented Question of Sport for probably 20 odd years now, I think. Sue Barker. Sue Barker, who I think that was her only singles Grand Slam title, but she did go to the semi-final of Wimbledon in 77, and she did go to the semi-final in the Australian Open in 75 and 77. So she was obviously at the peak of her tennis powers in the mid-70s. Number 9, who won the gold medal for England in the men's 400 metres hurdles at the 74 Commonwealth Games in Christchurch? And we were looking for the name was not David Emery, it was Alan Pascoe. Do you remember that name, Alan Pascoe? I think he was on things like Superstars. Do you remember that? He's 73 years of age now. He did actually start with the 110 metres hurdles, but he stretched out to the 400, finding he was much better suited to 400 metre hurdles, as obviously this showed. And he did pick up also a silver medal at the Olympic Games for the 4x400 metres relay. So he obviously had the speed as well as the jumping ability. So number 9, Alan Pascoe. Number 10, What year did the Crucible Theatre become the venue for the World Snooker Championships? And the answer is 1977. 1977. And it became synonymous, didn't it, with Embassy. We all called it the World Embassy Snooker Championships. I did mention last evening, if you were really good, you'd know who won it that year. And of course, it was won by the multi-world champion, John Spencer. John, who won it in 69, 71 and 77. Well done. Number 11. What was the score in the 1970 World Cup final when Brazil took on Italy? I'm sure you all know Brazil won. I'm sure you've all watched plenty of footage of this particular encounter. A lot of people relate it as one of the best finals of all time. Brazil won by 4 goals to a single Italian goal. Pelé getting one of the 4 goals. So that was number 11. Brazil beating Italy 4 goals to 1. Number 12. Who was the only home nation to reach the 1978 World Cup finals in Argentina? Which was the only home nation? So, unfortunately, England didn't make it. Nor did Wales or Northern Ireland. It was Scotland. Scotland was the only one. And I'll just recap you on their group. So they initially lost 2-1 to Peru. They drew 1-1 with Iran. And they incredibly beat the finalists, the Netherlands, by 3 goals to 2. And there was the famous Archie Gemmill goal that's been probably shown so many times, where he beat a number of defenders before slotting home. To progress, I think they had to beat the Dutch by 4 goals to 1, which they didn't, which meant Holland went on to progress to the second round. So Scotland, unfortunately, were knocked out on round 1. So Scotland is your answer to number 12. Number 13, Mark Spitz landed how many gold medals in the 1972 Munich Games? And we were looking for 7 Olympic gold medals. Now, as I probably mentioned before, he won 7 gold medals, setting 7 world records, that's kind of off the scale, isn't it, in terms of amazing. Mark Spitz is now 70 years of age. I've seen him advertise that it's like a little heart rate monitor, isn't it? Like you do a little mini ECG. I've seen him advertise that on telly. His record, by the way, lasted a whopping 36 years till a certain Michael Phelps won 8 golds in swimming at the 2008 Beijing Olympics. But of course, Phelps did not set 8 world records with 8 golds. So yeah, I suppose you could argue that Mark Spitz record of golds and world records was even better. But they're different eras, aren't they? So the answer to number 13, 7 gold medals. Number 14, Bill Shankly began managing Liverpool Football Club in 1959. But in what year during the 70s did he leave? So the answer we were looking for was 1974. 1974. It was actually a very surprise announcement from Shankly. Liverpool had not that long won the FA Cup, beating Newcastle 3-0 with 2 Keegan goals and a Steve Highway goal. And Shankly decided to retire from football, and like I say, a number of weeks after winning the FA Cup final, and he was succeeded by his long-term assistant, Bob Paisley. And of course, Bob went on to win European Cups, league titles, left, right and centre. So the answer to number 14, Bill Shankly departed the Liverpool Football Club in 1974. And finally, number 15, quite an interesting one this. In 1971, Muhammad Ali returned to boxing after nearly a 4-year absence. For what reason was he absent? Well, here's the story. In 1966, Muhammad Ali received his call-up papers to the US Army, to which he refused to join up and to be drafted, citing that he'd converted to Islam, so he didn't have to. However, he was indicted and convicted of draft evasion, and he faced up to 5 years in prison. However, he did appeal. He was stripped of his boxing titles. He appealed to the Supreme Court in the US, and they finally got round to overturning the decision. But he had to wait a long time, because this was quite a few years, as I say, 1971, before he actually was able to return to boxing. So it took quite a few years from him. And the reason he was drafted to the military was, I'm sure you've worked this one out already, was to go to Vietnam and to fight in the Vietnam War. So he obviously did the right thing by staying put. Yes, he lost some years, but he kept his life, didn't he, rather than going to Vietnam. And he went on to do some amazing things in boxing. So I hope you've enjoyed these 15 questions with the answers there. Hope it's got you thinking, getting some good sporting memories going on there, and maybe you've even picked something new up. So I hope you've enjoyed our journey through the 70s. Next time we'll probably look at the 80s and see where we go from there. So I hope you enjoyed it, and see you again soon. Bye bye for now.